Hello, everyone in the room or online. Welcome back, or welcome full stop if you're now tuning in. And I think now is a good time to tune in with this packed room. We will discuss something very pressing, and that is AI hardware. I'm Pieter Haeck, I'm a senior technology at POLITICO, and I will be joined by 4 esteemed speakers later. The global AI race is in full swing, and while it may feel sometimes that AI is falling from the sky into our laps, you actually need a lot of hardware and infrastructure to make that happen. Data centers, supercomputers, connectivity, we all need it. And we see that other regions, the US and China, are already spending hundreds of billions on that. And then, of course, the obvious question is, what is the EU doing? What is our plan? Before I introduce the speakers, I want to kindly remind you that you can ask questions via Slido. Use the proper ways to do that. And of course, you can talk about this event and this panel on the social media of your choice. There are quite some at the moment, so with the right hashtag, of course, Politico, AI, and Tech. I'm joined by several people here. Even 2 European lawmakers. That's always a pleasure, not 1, but 2. First, we have Bulgarian MEP Iva Maydell from the EPP. Welcome. We have Michael McNamara from the Renew Group. He's also co-chair of the Parliament's AI Implementation Group. We have Bertin Martens, who's a senior research fellow at think tank Bruegel. And last but not least, we have Johan Bernard, public policy director at Amazon. Welcome all. I would like to take us back a couple of months to December, January. In December, we had the Commission coming out with the AI Factories plan, this plan to create some AI-optimized supercomputers in different countries. But then again, a month later, we had OpenAI CEO Sam Altman standing in the White House and announcing this big plan of $500 billion to roll out AI hardware in the US. And to me, it felt a bit like, okay, the US is bringing out the big guns, the cannon, and we're playing with our water pistol. Is that a right sentiment? Mrs. Maydell, is that something that you also felt?
I think also shortly afterwards, we've understood that it's not just about how much money you invest with DeepSeek, revealing it's groundbreaking news in a way, and that also happened back in January. And this is why I always believe that we should have and craft our own vision and our own strategy. And in order for us to do that, I think we need to have a very clear outline plan, which first and foremost assesses where our strengths are, where we have certain dependencies, and where we would need to cooperate. Only then we can have a clearer strategy. I do not believe a strategy is one where you just announce a big amount of funding without knowing for what purpose you're going to use that huge amount of money. I think this is where, in a certain manner, we try to copy others. And I think we need to have our own unique way. So a little bit more of a vision and strategy, in my opinion, will be important, that is backed by data, that is backed by necessity. And it's not just backed by the fact that others are investing big amounts of funds, and we should do the same.
So the Commission
because our strengths are different with our competitors.
Should not go US style and announce a lot of funding.
Well, just like we have the European way of life, we have the European way of doing things. And I think it would be important for all of you here if we understand how those plans are backed. So you cannot just say we have a Letta and Draghi report, which are very important reports because some of us have been raising those issues for a number of years in terms of where we are lagging behind and what is needed. But you need a proper assessment in your tech capabilities where it makes most sense to double down and invest. You can't do it everywhere. We have limited resources. And even those big announcements coming from the US in particular, also those are a little bit fluffy. Now, a couple of months afterwards, we figured that out.
Shows, indeed.
So this is why, it's not about making similar investments, which we can never match to start with. But it's more about, being strategic and, a little bit operating like a surgeon, which is the area that we first need to tackle first.
I want to bring in the others, of course. It's not only about the funding, but the funding, of course, makes a lot of the jump towards getting AI to Europe. Mr. Martens, in December, I spoke to you and you said back then, like, okay, this is an incredibly costly race. Can you elaborate a bit to the audience, give the context of why building out AI hardware is so costly and why it's maybe not feasible for the Europe to match this kind of amount?
Yes, AI is costly, AI infrastructure is costly because scaling laws apply to AI modeling. The larger your infrastructure, the more data you have, and the larger your model, and the better the performance and the quality of that model. And we see that every day again, there is a ranking of the quality of frontier AI models, and the biggest models usually feature at the top of that ranking. Now, of course, in February, DeepSeek made a dent in that, and for a while, everybody was under the impression that with $5 million, you could build a model that was equally well done as a $100 million model from one of the big tech company. However, it soon turned out that was a little bit there wasn't the right comparison because the DeepSeek model was built on a much larger model that lay at the foundation of that. Besides, the DeepSeek model was not 5 million, it's probably closer to 50 million in reality. So we shouldn't get blinded by these sudden upsurges of smaller models. We now have thousands of these DeepSeek-like smaller models, and we will get many more, but they all rely on underlying much larger models. So playing catch-up, the EU playing catch-up with the US, I don't think is a good strategy. First, as Eva said, we don't have the resources for that, although OpenAI, with its Stargates announcement, proved that you can find the resources if you want to. In Europe, we say, we don't have capital markets union, we don't have sufficient private equity funds. But what did OpenAI do? They went to Abu Dhabi Wealth Fund, they went to SoftBank in Japan, and they got the money together. So if you really want to find the money, you can.
But that's of course private money, venture capital, because if we look at what the EU is now trying to do with the AI factories, that's mostly public money, of course.
Indeed.
Mr. McNamara, I want to bring you in. What is your sense of how the EU, because it's already being said like we should not try to copy the US, but the plan that the EU is now putting forward with the AI factories, is that the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a useful direction, but I mean, I'm not, most of the money that's being pledged by the EU is private funding. I mean, I think we have to be realistic. I mean, the overall Commission's budget is typically around 1% of European GDP, and I don't see that increasing in the near future. I just don't think there would be an appetite among member states for that to increase. So then it's a question of how it's divided up. I mean, I think the fact that Europe is locked into an MMF or multi-annual funding cycle that is still ongoing and ends in 2027 is one of the constraints that the Commission has. But it's mainly been, most of those announcements, the 200 billion announced by Ursula von der Leyen, the monies that had previously been invested, that she also mentioned at the Paris summit, even that, a large proportion of that funding is private funding. Because simply, the European Union has a very finite and very small budget, which is much, much smaller than most, I think, European citizens realise or acknowledge. Yeah. So it is about leveraging funding. And I mean, in that case, yes, you can make announcements, but sometimes even with the best of intentions, you make announcements and that the funding just doesn't come through, even though it's been pledged from investment houses. But I mean, there's more to, I mean, many of the obstacles are around infrastructure, as they are in industry more generally, around grid capacity, around generation capacity, and that's something that affects European industry much more broadly and is probably
Yeah.
quite difficult to address, but nevertheless essential that
it's
it be
more
addressed.
it's more than just the headline number. Mr. Bernard, I want to bring you in because, of course, if any company can give a sense of the investments in Europe, but also in other regions, it's Amazon. What do you make of the current numbers that are dancing around?
Well, I can only echo some of what was said previously. I think Europe is perfectly able to also make big announcements. You referred to what President von der Leyen announced, but also President Macron had announced a figure above 100 billion at the AI Action Summit. I was there a couple of months ago, so that I don't think Europe should doubt its capabilities. The question is, do we need? What are the needs that need to be funded? And I think it's very true that those needs are very substantial because, at Amazon we are a customer-obsessed company. We always start with the customer, and so we don't develop AI or foundational models for the sake of that. We look at what our customers need. What customers needs is very clear. Actually, we have developed some surveys to measure that. In Europe, only 42% of the businesses have adopted AI, but those which have seen a massive growth in revenue, more than 90%, and in profitability. So that's needed for economic growth, right? That's also needed for consumers. Consumers need, and in the previous intervention, there were some examples of the fact that consumers need, for some of their basic needs, those AI tools and applications. And so we should start from there and then look at what is funded by private funding, and that's indeed a very substantial part of it, and what remains to be funded through public funding. And I think the key here is how do we attract those investments to Europe in a way that enables Europe to equip itself, and to serve its customers and its citizens. And I think that's the key in terms of policy. How do we make those investments happen?
Yeah. A topic that I keep on hearing is indeed leveraging private investments, private capital, venture capital maybe. But we've seen, of course, before with European startups, with chips, that it's a very tough job for Europe to indeed make sure that venture capitalists or private equity is indeed contributing to these big projects. The capital markets union there is often mentioned. Mrs. Maydell, if I can bring it back to you, you're already for a while in European Parliament. This monster of Loch Ness of the Capital Markets Union comes back again. Is now the time to double down, and can AI hardware be a way to do that or to accelerate that plan?
Well, the short answer is yes. The elaborated answer is the following. You referred to the Capital Markets Union, and I guess we could in general terms refer to it in this sense. But if you read the Commission various plans that are on the table, there's now different ideas, whether it's a pension and insurance fund, whether it's a scale-up fund, which some of them I think are very meaningful and very needed. In a way, I'm glad it got a little bit rebranded because a year and a half ago, I stopped talking at panels about the Capital Markets Union. I've been, as you've said, for quite a while here. I've been pushing for that. A number of us have been pushing, but no progress was made. So my main point here is the following. First of all, Europe was built as a place, an area, and a union of big ideas. Single market, Schengen, Eurozone, and few others. It would be great if we can identify the few big ideas that can propel our economic and industrial base. If we look at the priorities that the Commission has in each commissioner's portfolio, there's so much that even at this panel, trying to identify how the funding is put together, we have different ideas of what the Commission is thinking, because most of the proposals, of course, are not properly announced. So personally, if we want something to be moved in a meaningful but also fast way, what I would like to see is less is more. Focus, be focused and say, we would need to deliver in the next 1 year the 2 or 3 most important things in the tech sector that would make a real difference for the economy, for the technological sector, for citizens, for the markets, etc., etc.
Do you think then that AI gigafactories to make maybe a European open AI, is that the priority we need?
I personally am not convinced on that, no.
So you dismiss the AI gigafactories
I don't dismiss
plan.
them. I don't dismiss them, but I'm not sure that has to be the priority. And again, I'm a politician. I'm not an expert. Yeah. The way I see it is that funding is not that it's a problem. It's not organized, and it lacks the purpose. Yeah. So you could say it has to be the gigafactory. I think it's first of all wrong for the institution to pick the champions. Yeah. I would rather leave it to the market to figure it out, but we need to put the right incentives. So more incentivize clearing the borders of the single market, making sure that Europe is an attractive place for investments, as some of our fellow panelists has met, making sure it can attract the talent, making sure that we support and connect the ideas and adopt AI.
But not pick
our
the winners.
Industry has
I'll
not
cross
done that.
the aisle to the other side of the parliament, Renew Group. The AI, I hear a bit of skepticism here about the AI gigafactories plan. What do you make of it?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you by perhaps agreeing with Eva. I mean, I think they're important, but I mean, I think they're not. I'm not convinced that we're going to compete with China and the USA at the moment for these, foundation models. I do think that obviously Europe needs to engage with AI and rapidly. But I think there's more scope perhaps in other areas like sectorial AI and smaller. But that still does require access to considerable compute power. So I don't have a problem with the announcement. But if that was to be the sole focus, and in fairness, I don't think the Commission have ever said that this is their sole focus. I think it would be...
No, but they have said that the gigafactories will be used for the most complex, most advanced AI models. But I hear you both saying, like, let's use the private investment that there is, the public money that there is, to maybe focus on application side, apply AI in the industry. That's more than that should the focus be?
Yes, but I mean, for startups to develop and for even for academia in Europe, I mean, they do need access to compute power, and that's a large part of what that announcement was about, setting up these gigafactories and supercomputers and funding them to make sure that there was access to that. But, we're not going to have a big leap in AI in Europe without energy and without grid capacity. And they are, I think, two of the harder parts to address. I know I've mentioned them earlier, but even France, which has announced very ambitious funding, 109 billion, I think it was, is perhaps best placed in terms of grid capacity and in terms of generation capacity. But even at that, I mean, it's not clear that the capacity that they have currently, which is far in excess of most European countries where you have no grid capacity and little generation capacity. Even at that, it's not clear that that's going to be sufficient to fuel the computing that's going to be involved in a 109 billion euro investment, or to meet the targets that have been announced.
Mr. Martens, I want to bring you in a bit on this discussion, like Europe maybe should not try to lead or should try to pick the winners in the frontier models, but maybe rather focus on the application side. Is that an assessment of you as well?
Yeah. I would say it's not a good idea for Europe to invest billions, tens of billions of taxpayer money in these gigafactories. I think Europe should give priorities to application layers built on top of existing frontier AI models. And there are millions of applications that are already being developed. And they can be developed with much less resources. They can be developed by mid-sized enterprises or startups in Europe. And I would agree with my co-panelist from Amazon saying we have to look at the customer, at the market for these models and applications. If you build a gigafactory and build a frontier model, where is the market? If you're Amazon or Google or Microsoft, you can roll such a model out in your global business model. If you have hundreds of billions of annual revenue and you can make a 1 or 2% dent in that, that pays off. But in Europe, we don't have such companies. So we have to do with mid-sized companies or small companies. They will have an increase in their productivity and profitability, but not in the order of the billions of dollars or euros that are needed to pay for such gigafactories and frontier models. So we should start at the application and work our way up.
This must be all music to your ears, Mr. Bernard, because you can provide with that data storage, with that help to roll out European AI applications.
Yeah. I think we have to think in terms of building blocks, right? There are a lot of building blocks that are needed. Obviously, applications that respond to the needs of the citizens, of the businesses, etc. But those applications to function need foundational models, which in turn need to be trained. That requires chipsets. That requires also a very robust cloud infrastructure, which in turn requires some generation, some grid capacity. And so all of these building blocks need to be financed. And obviously, one of the objectives that have been set by the Commission is the reform of financial market and the unification or harmonization. But there is so much more that can be done. If I refer to that piece of research that's by Strand Partners that we have commissioned, we see that regulation is seen as a blocker to AI adoption by a very large number of European businesses. We also see that the money can be found if we manage to attract those investments, but also to make the business cases that run based on AI function. And that requires a whole lot of different regulatory tools. So that's a combination of different things. And I think that they can be put together, and that's that holistic view that has to be taken.
Let's come to the several barriers later, because I really briefly wanted to go into the question, of course, of tax sovereignty. There's a lot of talk here in Brussels about, let's make sure that we reduce our reliances. But then again, I hear several people here saying like, okay, maybe we should leave the frontier models to the US. So bye-bye European tax sovereignty then? Bye-bye Eurostack? I don't know who wants to jump in.
Sure, I think,
Sure, bye-bye European
no,
tax sovereignty?
I'll chip in. No, I don't think that's what necessarily the panel is saying. You can interpret it in this way. I think what we are perhaps trying to project is we have limited resources. There are various priorities. So for us in this room, tech is a priority. In another room down the street, defense is a priority. And in a third room, another topic's a priority. So we cannot spread billions of euros into every priority. And if you do, you need to be targeted. To the point on gigafactories, there is a European AI company that is investing in its own gigafactory, which is more powerful and better than the ones that potentially will be announced, that they found private investors to support their idea, and they've been working on that for the past couple of months. So I think it's interesting to see, as again, to that point, what the market can do for itself and where we can support them. So it doesn't mean that they are asking Europe for 50 billion. They're saying, where can you support us? And let's figure out whether it's in permitting, whether it's in another way. And there is, in a way, a European champion should their idea
and we should facilitate them.
We should facilitate.
But then again,
my point in the beginning was the following: where are our strengths? Double down on them. Where are we feeling dependent, and where can we break dependencies when we speak about sovereignty? But where's the analysis that we have? Because to your point, you say, well, bye-bye European tax. No. But where's the analysis where we can understand where we can lead, where we need cooperation with not necessarily American tech companies, there are others, right, as well. We can cooperate.
Middle East?
Japanese, for example, Canada, UK.
Well, that helps. The tech chief is at the moment in Japan.
Indeed.
So.
But there's
so we should align more with that.
There's a reason to that. So let me... Let me just quickly finish the point. Keep on diverging myself.
Very briefly.
Anyway, my point is that right now, it doesn't mean it makes you less European if you're trying to be strategic. I consider myself a passionate European and a convinced European, and I have been working for all these years in that domain to help European tech. But it's time to sober up. Maybe there are certain trains that have left the station that we cannot catch up at this moment in time.
Okay.
We've tried in the past,
That
and it
point is
didn't
clear.
work out.
But then again, we have a tech commissioner who's visiting across Europe several AI factories, AI gigafactories in the making. Should we stop doing that? Should she stop doing that? And should she go to, I name one company, Mistral, and say like, okay, Mistral, we're going to support you. Is that the way it should be done, Mr. McNamara?
Well, I mean, I think Mistral is already in a position where it's able to attract private funding. I mean, I'm not sure Mistral is desperately in need of Commission funding. Again, I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that the Commission can just choose a champion. I mean, that's not how certain champions have evolved in the United States. It wasn't because a particular corporation was chosen. It's because of competition of ideas, innovation, etc. And I mean, I do think most people accept the role of free markets in Europe. Even those who think that the markets aren't working very well in Europe and aren't in a position to provide the levels of funding required. So I mean, I'm not sure that choosing a champion to the detriment of all others would be lawful or beneficial.
Mr. Martens, what's your assessment about this whole balance between public money, private money, picking winners, not picking winners, leaving it to the market?
Yeah, I think actually Eva gave the right example when she compared defense versus tech investment. Defense is a public good. No private company buys tanks or guns or fighter planes. Tech is a private good that is perfectly commercializable and you can sell that in the market. So there's no public money necessary there. We should focus on defense with our EU taxpayer money, not on the tech sector. When it comes to the tech sector, what we can do, for example, is, as my colleague from Amazon here said, Amazon is already heavily invested, is one of the leaders in the cloud computing market in Europe, together with Google and Microsoft. If we want tech sovereignty in AI, 2 weeks ago here in Brussels, Microsoft President Brad Smith gave a remarkable speech at the Atlantic Council where he said Microsoft is going to create a separate Microsoft Europe, legally separate from the US, so that it falls outside the jurisdiction of any US presidential administration, to keep it separate and to keep their cloud computing infrastructure separate. And so why don't we go to Microsoft or Google or Amazon and say, why don't you invest here in AI factories in the European Union? They're profitable for you. And I'm sure if the Commission says we are willing to subsidize it to the tune of 20 or 30% with taxpayer money, none of these companies will refuse that offer.
Well, we have Amazon here. Let's ask.
Let's ask them.
Are you ready to invest in AI gigafactories here in Europe?
Absolutely, and we do this. I'll come to this. I'll come to this in a moment. I think there is a confusion because if we think in terms of digital autonomy, to be strong, because that's what this is about, to make your own choices. Europe needs to be part of the innovation process, and it also needs to be part to have the right infrastructure, right? Innovation is global, right? Innovation has always been global, right? Investment capabilities are global as well. So if we think in isolation, then we have to reinvent the wheel on everything, and then comes the question of resources. Instead of doing that, we can make sure that this innovation happens in Europe, and these investments flow to Europe. And just, I think that's how we can make Europe stronger and more autonomous. And that's really, I think, where there is that confusion, which kind of assimilates isolation and autonomy, which should not be the case. And to your question, at Amazon, we think about data sovereignty by design, and we think of it as everything we do at the scale of the customer, meaning that by design, with systems like Amazon Nitro, AWS Nitro, we make sure that only the customer, only the business, the European business can have access to their data. And we go beyond for certain very highly regulated businesses, and we have announced a 7.8 billion investment that will be in Germany for our European sovereign cloud, which is indeed a specific region that will be separated to make sure that the highest levels of security are achieved with that region. So this is
just like Microsoft.
This
you're
is really
also saying like Amazon in Europe should be a separate entity investing here.
The European
in
sovereign cloud will be indeed separate, both logically and physically, and will be operated only by EU residents.
Yeah. Really briefly, yeah.
Yeah. May I ask a question to my Amazon co-panelist? How much has Amazon invested in Europe in AI infrastructure? I mean, not just cloud storage and computing, but actually AI hardware to train models and to do inference on AI models?
I don't have that figure, to be
But
honest
have
with you.
at all in Europe?
We have invested, yes, absolutely, in infrastructure that serve the purpose of AI and developing AI, absolutely. But I couldn't give you a figure.
But they will share it definitely afterwards, I feel it.
I just wanted to pick up on the idea that innovation is global. I mean, the Irish language is a minority language in Ireland. It's an official language. It's also an official language of the European Union. But there's a university in the south of Ireland, UCC, which is developing an Irish language, large language model. And two of the main computer scientists that are working on that and driving that are Vietnamese. It's just an example. So, I mean, the idea that, no matter what you do, people are mobile, and are particularly mobile in this field. So, I mean, I just think that you can build silos, but they don't necessarily, or you can try to build walls and obstacles, but it's kind of, I think, pointless when you're looking at experts. On the idea of Amazon investing money, I mean, the data centers aren't very fashionable in Ireland, certainly at the moment, and there's big debate about them at a European level too. But I mean, there are a number of countries in Europe where Amazon, that I'm aware of, certainly one country, and I know that there are others, where Amazon is trying to develop data centers and can't because of infrastructural deficits in Europe. And that is something that the state can do at a European level and at a national level, and it's something that I think the state needs to do if we're to talk about this. I mean, I know I keep harping back to it. It's not very sexy talking about energy generation and grid capacity, but you're not. I mean, that's where some of the massive investment is going in the United States as well, with Microsoft
I really
talking
want
about
to have it indeed
Island.
about other barriers that we currently have, because funding is indeed one of them, but energy was already mentioned. Skills is also one that often pops up. Like, if we speak about rolling out AI hardware in Europe, it's of course funding, but it's of course also energy. It's about talent. If we, for example, speak about talent, skills is often not the most sexy topic here in Brussels. It's also something that, of course, is mostly managed on the member state level. That's the same for energy. So the problem there is too is Brussels can preach all at once in this, for example, in its AI continent plan. But if we speak about settling energy, settling skills, where are we at the moment? Are we in good shape there? What's the state of play?
Well, maybe I can give it a start. We have measured that. We have asked European businesses what was blocking or slowing down AI adoption. And indeed, skills is named by 56% of these businesses as a blocker. So I think there is indeed, and here we are talking about the public good, right? There is indeed a special effort to be done. That doesn't mean that only public funding has to be involved. We at Amazon have different programs to help that. Amazon Future Engineer is one of them that we've launched in Europe already several years ago, just in France, and I can't remember the other countries, but we have already had more than 1 million young people who have been trained or sensitized to AI and to tech. Thanks to that, we have other programs like AWS Skills to Job Tech Alliance. So it's a joint public-private effort, but definitely talents, definitely expertise is absolutely a point where Europe can become a leader, and Europe is already a leader, because when I look at the number of Fields medals, when I look at the talents we have here already in Europe, we are really in a good shape.
Yeah. Mrs. Maydell, can you speak from the Bulgarian perspective or more in
Maybe
general?
I can speak also a little bit from my perspective, because the topic of skills is one of the topics that reminds me of the Capital Markets Union. When I was first elected as MEP almost 11 years ago, these were two of the topics that I would often comment, talk, provide suggestions. And it kind of feels that we did not manage on neither of the two to deliver something tangible from an EU perspective. There would always be the excuse on skills, it's a member state competence. There would always be the excuse on the Capital Markets Union, well, it's two member states that are blocking it, so we can't do much. I had a point that less is more. Currently, there are so many strategies, ideas, communication. Everybody is in a rush to propose something. It reminds me a bit from the last term. There was a commissioner for whom it was very important to just put the next stick to the next finished trialogue, irrespective of how good or bad or rushed or not rushed the legislation was. There were a few that worked in that space. And so we've never done and moved a single inch from 11 years ago on doing something more on skills or on attracting talent, apart from few initiatives. And so my feeling a little bit is that the market and that citizens have started to adapt themselves. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have gained enough knowledge and enough skills to have that competitive advantage. A few years ago, we were saying, well, people should code. Well, now you don't really need to code, do you? Because AI does it for you, okay? So I think if we're to move onto that topic, you cannot have a commissioner responsible for 100 things and 100 things are a priority. You need to task people more concretely. The competition about who puts more proposals on the table is a competition of the past. Nowadays is who is strategically, more targeted, more, as I said, like who works as the surgeon out there to make sure we identify what's the most urgent thing to heal our economy. Yeah. So these are the sort of things that, to be honest, bother me a little bit, because I am part of that bubble and part of the system. And some of us, again, have been calling for this mindset to change. We keep on proposing laws, communications, rules in the same manner as we did it 10, 15 years ago.
Let's
but the
come
world
back to the
has
regulation
evolved.
part later, but about the skills, because, sorry. We're nearing the moment that AI could become all-powerful, the artificial general intelligence moment, super intelligence moment. And then, of course, we will maybe see a movement that skills are obsolete or that certain jobs are obsolete. Should AI and skills be a more strategic priority of the Commission, given that this AGI moment might be around the corner? Mr. McNamara.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but you might not agree with how the Commissioner or what the Commissioner proposing, but I mean, I think they have very much agreed that AI is of huge strategic importance. I mean, it's been a huge focus of this Commission. Skills, perhaps a bit less so, and it needs to be addressed. But I mean, how acute is the skills shortage, and how much is it just driven by the fact that people can? I mean, we have a lot of graduates coming out of Europe. It's just a lot of them are going elsewhere because they can get better salaries, perhaps, and it's the same. I mean, there's a huge number of Russian graduates that are leaving Russia that would come to Europe instead. They're going primarily to North America again because I think it's about financing as much as anything else. I mean, the skills are there. I just looked over my shoulder and saw your sponsors, MasterCard. I know that they're developing a lot of their AI in just south of Dublin at the moment, so they seem to be attracting the skills that they require to do that. So I think it goes back to money and financing to an extent rather than than the caliber of graduates coming out of our universities
And about
in Europe.
salaries, because I saw you nodding, Mr. Martens, it's often mentioned that in Europe there are ample AI researchers at the university level, but then we come to commercialization and these companies are like, okay, let's pick this lab and let's pick this university. Can you give a bit of an insight of how we can stop that outflux of talent?
Yeah, I think for AI models and services, we have a big pricing problem in Europe, a price distortion problem. For skills, as Mr. McNamara just said, we have ample supply of skilled people leaving universities, but the really good people are picked up by people on the other side of the Atlantic because salaries are 2 to 3 times higher for the same skill level. On the other hand, for AI, you also need electricity. Europe, electricity is 2 to 3 times more expensive than in the US, so you don't go for that to Europe. You also need data, and European regulations block a lot of access to data. So we block ourselves on many components of the AI production chain in Europe. And that's very difficult for the Commission to have an impact on. The Commission has no impact, no leverage on wages for computer scientists. It may affect the regulatory part, of course, but that was the subject of another debate in another panel.
But how do you fix that then? How do you make sure that the wages of computer scientists are going up here in Europe?
How do you
fix that?
I don't see how you can fix that so easily. That's companies offering salaries, and that depends on the productivity and profitability of the company. If a company can offer a really high-ranking, high-scoring computer science graduate a more productive job, they can pay him a higher salary.
Okay.
Just a quick example when it comes to skills. I think we also need to lead as institutions by example. So we are constantly saying what Europe should do in terms of enhance itself digitally. How about the digital transformation of our institutions? And here I think we can learn a lot from our Ukrainian friends who during wartime managed to put the state in a mobile phone, offering more than, I think at this point, 200 services to their citizens, including upskilling their citizens. The app is used by 22 million people on a daily or weekly basis, something that no European country can match in terms of proportionality. So if they can do it in such an efficient manner where the state has fully digitalized itself, offering services and a platform to people, not just to report if they see a tank and where it is, not just to claim damages or get divorced or married, but also to upskill themselves. Why can't we do it? I mean, perhaps they did it in a shorter period of time than we adopted the EID legislation, which is still not fully
What is holding governments back? I can imagine you engage a lot with governments about a digitization strategy. What is holding them back from doing exactly that?
Well, I think that's exactly, maybe that's the transition with your last part, which is about regulation. The key about AI and the benefits of AI is to strike the right balance between obviously measuring the risks, and this is the purpose of the AI Act, but also fostering adoption, right? We see that, for example, in businesses, large caps tend to be lagging behind. We see that some types of organizations, like public sector organizations, tend to be lagging behind. So the question I think we have to ask to ourselves from a regulatory standpoint is, what do we do to foster adoption so that the benefits that we see that are already measurable of AI can quickly expand, increasing Europe's productivity and value creation. And I think at least I have a lot of hopes that this will be part of the Apply AI strategy that the Commission is preparing at the moment.
Yeah. If we talk about that, about indeed regulation, the AI Act, we had it, but indeed there is much more coming. There is the Apply AI strategy coming, the Cloud and AI Development Act. How do you turn this whole machinery into something that apparently is perceived as restrictive, rather into indeed fostering uptake? And that's maybe a question for all of you really quickly, because we're running out of time. If we look at it now and 1 year from now, what is the ideal finishing? No?
Panelist one.
Yeah?
I think the way the European Union could go very productively would be to round off the sharper edges of AI regulation, do something about electricity markets to make this input cheaper for AI services in Europe, and invest in much smaller, not gigafactories, but let's say AI in computing infrastructure with 10, 20, 30,000 NVIDIA chips, not in the hundreds of thousands, and not aim for the sky, catching up with the US, but aim for some mid-sized companies and services, and that would increase productivity.
That's already a list round of the sharp edges and electricity grids and other suggestions?
Yeah, maybe very quickly, since we conclude on regulation, I think three things should be done. One is, how do we foster AI? And I already mentioned it. This is the Apply AI strategy. The second one is, how do we make sure that we create some form of single market in that space as well? And therefore, how do we make sure that we keep the compass of having global standards and not deviating too much from those global standards so that we can maximize the benefits? And the third one is, how do we make sure that we have the data available to make it work? And on that one, I have great hopes in the data union strategy that was just announced by the Commission.
MEPs, because we're really going over time.
I wasn't sure if I want to intervene, but very briefly. So first and foremost, the Commission has to come with a very clear analysis. Where do we stand with our tech capabilities? Only if we have that, we can take the right decisions. We need this data, which is currently lacking. Secondly, because I did not speak about the energy situation, we have one of the highest energy prices in the world. There's no way we can be competitive. So this should be the second. And third, unleash financing and attract more investors.
Just on the issue of energy, I mean, the focus of the European institutions, even post-Draghi on energy, has been on traditional large energy users rather than on AI. That needs to change. AI needs to be put on a priority with steel makers, etc., in Europe. But any decisions that we make around energy, we have to be realistic. It's going to be 10 years before they impact, even if those decisions are made tomorrow. And there's no sign of major strategic decisions being made tomorrow, even though they're needed. On the uptake of AI, I mean, the Commission or national governments can't order private corporations to use AI more, but they can tell their own staff. They can tell civil servants and civil service to use it more.
Back to the governments and lead by example.
Yeah, and I think that is something they can and should do.
I have to cut you short because we're going massively over time. So I'm going to keep it brief as well. I'm going to thank my speakers. That was a nice list for the Commission that they can work with in the next year to make AI more productive and foster AI uptake. So yeah, big round of applause. Stay seated because... Next up is our sustainability editor, James Fernyhough, who will shortly interview Michel Patron, the general manager and the global sustainability lead at Microsoft. So stay seated. I see a lot of people leaving, so thanks.